Segments from Life in the Arts can now be viewed on demand on YouTube.com. Just go to YouTube.com, add /Longtimers, and that will take you to our YouTube channel. Welcome to another edition of Life in the Arts, the art enrichment program that presents art lessons, virtual field trips to museums and art galleries, plein air painters, performing artists, student films, and more. On today's program, we welcome back our favorite art teacher, Laurie Myers, who presents a watercolor lesson in the style of Paul Cezanne. Life in the Arts begins now.
Hi, welcome to Life in the Arts. I'm Laurie Myers, and today we're going to be studying about Paul Cezanne. Cezanne was born in 1839 in Aix-en-Provence, France, and he really wanted to be a painter, but his family wanted him to be a banker. Many times the artists that we study, their fathers wanted them to continue in the profession that they had or some other profession that was a money maker, because very often artists do have trouble making money. And in France at this time, Cezanne's father was very well-to-do, but he really wanted his son to do something that would give him a good job and make money. But as we find so often, painting was a passion. And so they might go to school, to the universities, become the stockbrokers, the bankers, or whatever their dads wanted them to become, and then that passion took over and they had to start painting. And fortunately for us, Cezanne did just that, because he's made some beautiful paintings. In the beginning of his career, they were rather dark and they were rather dense, and they had black line around the various fruits and the still life that he did. Now, still life is when you set something up like fruit and bottles and some books and stuff like that, and then you paint it. Those things can't move off the table. And then we have landscapes, which are paintings that are done from whatever we see outdoors. Mountains, trees, flowers, things like that. Okay, so Cezanne did very many still life. When he did still life, he based his whole concept on basic shape. He said we could draw anything if we could draw a sphere, a cone, a cylinder, and a cube. And so he was really our first cubist. Sometimes he would take a landscape and he would break it down into little blocks. And that was really the beginning of Cubism. When he did his still life, with a heavy black line maybe around the fruit, his light and shadow, it was very different, very interesting. Lots of people didn't like his paintings at all at first, but now we think of him as a great master, and they were really beautiful. He was considered a post-impressionist. Now, the Impressionists were busy trying to capture the light. What Cezanne wanted to do was capture light, but have it look a little bit more like the old masters. He wanted it to have depth, weight, mass, and volume, to look real, to look three-dimensional. And so if you look at his work, he does that. It's quite strong, very vibrant, but it has a solidity, a solidness to it. Okay? Now in his landscapes, he was very good. They have much lighter quality, happier quality. And I think that came from him leaving Paris, going back to his hometown of Aix-en-Provence, and deciding that he was going to go outside and paint what he saw. And he lightened up his palette quite a bit. So if we can look at these paintings, this is called A View of Saint-Henri and the Bay of Marseille. And I want you to look at all the little blocks. That's kind of part of his cubist approach to this. And then this one that I just love, which is very impressionistic. The brush stroke is kind of loose and dots and dashes. I like this a lot. This is just a landscape, but you can see some of his houses kind of cubist in form, some of his trees kind of cubist in form. But this is very light, very kind of relaxed painting. He did lots of paintings of Mont Saint-Victoire, which was a big mountain that you can see out of Aix-en-Provence. And he loved that mountain. And so many of the paintings that if you go and you look at a book of Cezanne, you'll see lots of paintings of Mont Saint-Victoire. Okay, so today we're going to do our own rendition of a Cezanne landscape. And basically it's going to be a landscape that just incorporates lots of different colors of greens and blues and brushstroke. And it could be a place that you've gone or that you've seen. Very often when we're driving along the car, we'll see fields or we'll see mountains or we'll see the light and shadow, how it makes the canyons. I want you to look at those things because light and shadow are what is so important in creating any good painting, and especially in landscapes. Okay, so I have watercolor paper here. You don't have to use watercolor paper, but your painting will turn out much better. It accepts the paint in a much better way. And so let's get started. I always start with a nice big jar of clean water. And I just use these simple little watercolors for this. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off from the top and we're going to work forward. Okay, so we'll make our sky first. So when I say make a blob of the color, I want you to just take your paint box and make a nice smushy blob like this that moves, that's not too dry, where you can make a pretty sky. And I'm going to just tip in, I think, a little bit of purple. That's going to bring up that blue to be even more beautiful. Okay, you got to make plenty of paint because when you're painting a watercolor, you're going to work quickly and you want to be able to take that paint and move it quickly across the paper so that you don't create a lot of lines. This is going to take a lot of water. I'm coming across the top here. This sky is going to be quite faded. And I'm going to come down, I'm going to make a little line for you right here because I'm breaking my paper up into thirds. If you're working on watercolor paper, you've got a lot more room to make mistakes than you do if you're working on just drawing paper. If you're working on drawing paper, you might come into some problems because once the paint is down on the paper, it pretty much stays there. We're not going to see much of that horizon line at all. That's going to kind of disappear when we go into our mountains. Okay? So you can see this is curling a little bit. Watercolor paper you can stretch. I could have taken this piece of paper and completely wet it and then dried it or taped it down to dry it, and then it won't curl as much. Very often I don't have time to do that, so I just kind of put up with the fact that it curls a little. Now, you can take the paper and you can hold it this way, or you can push it this way, and you can see that as it comes down, it'll almost look rainy. It creates kind of a different type of sky. I'm going to put my water right there. It'll hold it down just a touch. Now, as the sky is drying, you want the sky to be darker as it comes at the top and lighter as it comes down to the horizon. But you still see a big sheen on it. I can create clouds by taking my paper towel and just mushing in here a little bit, little round puffs. And this is called blotting or lifting out. Okay, so there's a few little clouds in there. Now, the reason that I put the purple in the blue is they have a tendency to separate from each other. So when they separate, you get kind of an interesting bluey, purpley, makes for a more interesting sky. This is the painting that I did that we're working from. Now, these other clouds that are in here are painted afterwards. So notice that this is dark at the top, and as we move to the horizon, it gets lighter. And since it's a landscape, we're working on the idea of thirds. So remember, this is the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. Now, when mountains are in the background, they have a tendency to be quite purple. And that comes from something that's called aerial perspective. Have you ever looked out and seen those layers of mountains that's like they're kind of grayish or foggyish, and as they come forward, they get darker and darker? Well, that happens because as the dust particles come off the Earth, the light is picking up those dust particles, and it makes those mountains appear that they're grayish or purplish. But you know, they're not at all. They can be completely green when you get up close, or almost even black when you get up close. So we have to take that into consideration, that from far away, they're going to appear very light, almost see-through, kind of a foggy type quality. Now, I'm not going to do mountains that look like volcanoes, okay? We're not in Tahiti, we're not in Hawaii. I want them to be rolling. So as you come across your paper, I want you to just roll these mountains on. Notice this is quite purpley blue. You can't really see it very well. And I don't want it to be seen very well. I want it to just kind of drift away. And I'll bring it across like this. I think that painting is sitting down well enough now, so I can take that off. Okay, so those are just some rolling purple mountains in the background. Now, as those are drying, remember, they're quite far away. We want to make layers and layers coming forward. I'm going to make a green, so I'm going to take a little green from my paint box, mix a blob. I don't want it to be bright green in the background. The colors become stronger and stronger and stronger as they get to the foreground. So you want to make sure that with your colors you keep them kind of shaded and a little bit grayed, but you don't use black. As you do the background, you can keep them kind of that other color. See, those are kind of drifting away. Let's take a look at Cezanne's work. See how these mountains are almost kind of non-existent. They're quite far away. Okay? So, now we're going to make the second layer. So the second layer, I'm going to bring them up here, and they're darker, but they're not bright green out of the paint box green. I want you to get used to not painting directly from just whatever color you see in the paint box. It's much more fun to mix and to play with color. And I'm just mushing these colors together. I put a little blue in there. None of these paintings ever turns out exactly the same. I use a rather loose hand, quite a bit of water. I can always come back in and add more paint, but I don't want to overpaint. I want this to be soft and see-through and quite watercolory. Okay, so this is my background range, and then I have another range of mountains as I come forward. Okay, and my horizon line really is going to be somewhere kind of in here, but it's definitely not going to be right in half. Okay, now with a stronger green, I'm going to come out here and make fields. And the fields are going to just be little lines that kind of come here. I just give the impression of fields. And I'm just going to play with my colors. You can too. I am keeping a horizon line a little bit, but I don't want a straight line totally going in the background there. I want to break up my horizon line. Now to this mushy mess that I have that's kind of purple and green, I'm going to add a little bit of brown and bring some mountains in here because we can't see the whole landscape because there are layers that are coming forward. And I'll pick up a little yellow and maybe add a little yellow in here because we have lots of different plains. As you look out over a valley where they grow things, you will see almost a patchwork quilt type of look to it. And you can create that patchwork. Now I know I'm painting quickly, but you can catch up as you go. You don't have to just quickly paint. I want you to see the techniques and the brushstroke. Do you see how this is kind of runny? But I can already tell that it is a landscape, that I have some fields out here and that I have these mountains. The way that it bled into the sky almost looks misty, like the clouds are right there. I think I'll just leave that. I don't have to have it be a straight line right there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring this water into the foreground. This is going to be kind of a turquoisey green. And I'm just going to give a little bend here with this line. And I am going to add water because I don't really want any strong drawing lines, really. I want this to be quite wet and mushy. Very often people overpaint and they don't keep that wonderful freshness of the stroke and the lightness of the watercolor, and you don't want to do that. It actually, sometimes less is definitely more in this type of painting. There's no exact in watercolor because it kind of does its own thing. So every time you paint a new watercolor, it's like going on a little different journey. I'm adding purples and blues and creating this water with those. I'm mushing them together. I like how they bleed together in the color. Okay, so there's that water. We'll let that sit for a second. Cezanne really just went out into nature and painted what he saw. Very often his composition was very different because he'd put a tree right in the middle, which wasn't, something that your basic art teacher would teach you. But he saw it, and so he painted it, and he liked it, and those are some of his most famous paintings. They'll just have a tree right up through the center of the painting. He finally was accepted, which was really a great thing for him. His friend, he was good friends with a man named Émile Zola, and Émile Zola was an author, and he wrote a book called The Masterpiece. Now this is Cezanne's best friend, and The Masterpiece was about a failed painter, and Cezanne knew it was about him, and so he was so upset, and they pretty much broke their friendship off. It was a sad thing because they were quite close, and after the book was written, and the book was kind of a hit, it was very sad for Cezanne, which gave him even more of the feeling that he wanted to become a great painter. And now he's accepted worldwide as one of the greatest painters in the fact that he started as a post-impressionist and then went to cubism. And the paintings in real life, if you can ever see them in real life, they are so beautiful, beautifully done. He did do watercolor, he did oil paint as well, and he was great at sketching too. As I said, the things in the beginning were dark and dense, and as he progressed, his palette lightened up into these colors. The climate in Aix-en-Provence is quite warm, and the light is really good, so lots of painters went there to paint. And so then, it gave him the opportunity to paint outside. So let's do some little trees down here. I'm just going to make some little blobs of green that kind of go to light, and I'm not going to be real particular on these. And you should need, or I'll add a little blue in there. And we can kind of give them some trunks that are kind of easy. And we'll create the different greens. Landscapes have so many different greens. We'll bring this on the edge of this water. So you really want to add several different colors. And I'm just kind of doing that impressionistic type of thing in the fact that I'm just kind of mushing the color together. Okay, dots and dashes of color, that's how the the Impressionists did it, and the Post-Impressionists. They used lots of dots and dashes of color. Okay, and up on my horizon line here, I'm going to add a little brown and blue into my paint. I want to create some trees. Now, with the tip of my brush, I'm just going to go like this and create some little trees and some little buildings, maybe right here in the background. I don't want to come across my horizon line and have them be all the same height and exactly the same color. That's too boring, and usually it doesn't work that way if you're out looking at those things. I do want to create a bit of a line, though, to make my horizon where they connect with the mountains. That's important, because that you will see in real life. If you look out, if you're going down the freeway and you're actually looking out into the fields or up to the mountains, you can see the little dots and dashes of barns and of trees and little bits of color and patchworks of the various fields. Okay, so, and they're not all the same height and length. Maybe we'll make a little building there and one there, but they're just impressions of buildings. Okay, and I'm going to come in here with various colors and just make these blobs of color, and because we're basically just giving the impression that we're out looking at nature. And this is kind of a view that I see a lot as I drive to work, so it often comes up in my paintings. And you'll find too that wherever you live, your paintings will reflect what you look at every day. And it's easy for those things to come out. So it was easy for Cezanne to paint what he saw, because he saw Mont Saint-Victoire and he saw these various pictures that he painted every single day. And so when he went out in nature, he could go paint them. The one thing that I really wish for you to do is when you're on the playground and you're outside, is I want you to see how the light is being captured, whether it be hitting the swing or hitting the grass or the trees in the background, or can you see mountains from the playground? Are they layered? How is the light casting the shadows of light and dark on the mountains, on the trees, on your friend? Even if you're drawing a person, we've got light and shadow, so those are important things to take a look at. And this is a view that I see, but it's not an actual representation of something that I'm looking at. If I was outside and I was painting this, I would be called a plein air painter. Okay, that's French for out in the open, plein air. Okay, and so that's what they did. They took their supplies out of the studio and they went out into nature and they painted, which was different than the old masters did, because the old masters would go and look at something and then run back to their studios, and with their oil paints they'd set up their easel and they would paint that way. And the plein air painters actually packed up their stuff and went outside, which was a real different way. That started happening in the late 1800s, where they actually did the plein air painting, and then it just became popular and normal. But can you imagine, there was an academy in France that said painting had to be done in a certain way. And what they wanted is they used very dark colors, and they layered and layered the paint in a very thin way. It was very thick. It had no, it was very thin. It had no thickness to it. As the painters progressed and kind of broke the rules of the academy, of which Monet and Cezanne and Van Gogh and all the subsequent painters broke the rules, they started to take paint and just mush it out of the tubes and put it on and scrape it with a palette knife and mush it with a brush so that you could actually feel the edge. That's called impasto. Okay, so That's not something Cezanne did a whole bunch of, but he did break the rules in the fact that he was no longer sitting in a studio painting all these pictures. He was outdoors doing plein air landscapes. Okay? So I have to take a look at this and see what I think. I don't want to overpaint, but it somewhat has a feeling. I'm not Cezanne, of course, but it has a feeling like this in the fact that it's kind of loose, kind of impressionistic, and he's done the traditional third where you've got the background, middle ground, and foreground. You could stick a little red barn in the background, but you want to be real careful how you use the paint color because your eye will go directly to that point. I kind of like the softness of this, and so I think I'll just leave it this way. But you're welcome. I mean, I could just keep painting. I see these trees are kind of, maybe I want them to disappear a little bit. They're kind of sticking out like little lollipops. Okay. And you could play around with this, and I can play around with this actually until I totally ruin it, because sometimes I love painting so much and I love using my brush so much that I will paint a painting to death. And I want you to be careful not to do that, because it's easy to do, because it's just fun to put the paint to the paper and have it work and come up with something. Now, if you get frustrated, remember, it's only a piece of paper. Okay, don't worry about it. This is watercolor, it's just a piece of paper. You can try and try and try again. But I do want you to notice that I use some different brush strokes. I use the paint in rather a loose manner, but you really have to get the paint so that you can control it. I don't want it to control you. I want you to control the color, and I want you to kind of control how it moves around on the paper. Although I said watercolor kind of has a mind of its own, it is going to do what it's going to do, whether you want it to do that or not. Sometimes it makes bubbles and blobs, and, you know, like my little blurry mountain there, it does that. But don't get frustrated. That's the beauty of watercolor. I hope you had fun doing this, and I hope that you will learn more about Cezanne and his wonderful life, because he truly is one of our great masters. Thanks.
Coming soon to Life in the Arts.
You can sort of measure ahead of time, and that helps. Then a little bit of glue all over the place. Don't be afraid to put down lots of glue, and there, presto changeo, is almost the roof of the...
From our vault of vintage video, a lesson in torn paper collage from artist and teacher Bill Stone. Rare footage of sculptor Frederick Hart, best known for his carvings on the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., and the statue of the three soldiers at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial.
It took another 2.5 years. So the whole process took about 10 years for all of the different works. There's the ex nihilo.
Sunset, sunset, a sunset until welcome.
Plus, behind-the-scenes footage of the magic carpet in preparation for an international tour. Don't miss a single future episode of Life in the Arts.